Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. I want to talk today about PTSD and preparedness. I was checking the comments that I hadn't gotten back to on, let's see, which one was it? On one of the more recent videos on misplaced priorities. And got a question here from Orange Skis, and then a follow-up response to him from Carl H., the hermit with Wi-Fi. And rarely have I felt that I wanted to get right out and make a video in response or answer a question right away, but I did in this case. And so I haven't even gone out to start any of the other things on my day yet, and I want to get to this because it's an important subject, important topic, an important question that I hope I can give an answer to. I'll warn you right off here. I'm going to get into God a little bit, and some of you are going to understand that completely. And for those of you who don't want to hear it, let me lovingly say you need to hear it all the more. Okay. Let me read the questions here, and then I'll give you my answer. He says, question, how to start to develop community. For people who experienced severe human rights abuse in the past, which cost us our health, home, and family, and as a result have trauma and severe PTSD and fear of people, how to learn to develop community when you are starting completely over from scratch, having no family or friends after losing them all in the prior tragedy. Thanks. And then the response to him from Carl H. says, this spoke to me a lot. I have been diagnosed with PTSD, but not due to warfare, due to their society. I have lost a portion of my health. My lady and I are strained, and I live in a place with 30 people, and I think it's too crowded, and I lock my door like a habit. Never did that before. My only way out is that I have a tribe. People who share my values, are like-minded, have something to offer, and this takes time and is scary. Trust does not come easily, if at all, for us. We need proof, and we are always on guard. And then he puts in a quote here, PTSD never goes away, it just goes quiet from time to time. How true. What an important question, and what a great response from the hermit there. So let me start here saying, now I'm gonna be making one here pretty soon called Let's Go to Real Old School. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, as many of you know. I went into law enforcement in the early 70s and was in law enforcement through the 70s and 80s. That was old school. I mean, that was going back, touching on old school. I never heard, back then PTSD was not a thing. It wasn't thought of, it wasn't talked about. We knew that a lot of the guys that came back from previous wars, World War I, II, they called it shell shock. A lot of the guys came back from Vietnam severely screwed up. We never gave a thought to it, and our thought process back then was, hey man, be a man, stand up, toughen up, buttercup, and deal with it. I mean, that's how we solved things back then. And to an extent, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I mean, you got to deal with it. But I'm not saying that about PTSD. But that was, nobody wanted to go into it. And a lot of people that suffered from it, and I learned later that, believe it or not, and this surprised me, police officers, I don't like to say suffer, because that carries with it a victimhood experience. I will say experience, because experience is something you can deal with, okay? Police officers, studies show, experience PTSD at a higher rate than do veterans, and that surprised me. It comes from for different reasons, and I'm not going to get into all that. I just found it interesting, and I only found that out years later. Now, I always lived, even after I got out of, and I worked, as you all know, or you may know, I worked the highest crime areas, the ghettos of a big city. I went undercover narcotics, undercover organized crime. More so than most people would understand that means, and I'm not going to get into details there, but it was to say that it was stressful is very understating it. The situation, the problem is that it becomes addictive. Danger becomes addictive. Violence becomes addictive. Constant. I'm searching for the word that I want. Conflict becomes addictive and enjoyable. You become hyper vigilant. You are always on guard. You trust no one. The isolation that comes from that is profound. And then when you leave that environment, now as long as you're in that environment, that environment and the needs for those behaviors provide a sense of normalcy. It seems normal to you. I remember that when I would sometimes spend a Sunday or something with my family or go someplace normal, it just drove me nuts. I wish that somebody would, if we were out eating, I wish that something would happen so that there would be a conflict there that I could get involved. Not with my family, If somebody came in with a gun and tried to shoot the place up, I said, well, that'd be interesting. I need that to relieve me of my boredom with normal life. It gets to the point where you are so separated from reality, and I don't necessarily mean that some would argue a neurosis, perhaps, but you are not separated from reality in a psychotic way. So I dealt with that. While I was still involved in the work, it just seemed normal, and it fulfilled a great part of me. It gave me something interesting. I looked around at the rest of the world. I thought, man, what boring lives these people could have. How could they possibly be happy just having a job and having a family and going home to their family and having barbecues? That doesn't seem like happiness to me. It seems boring. Well, when I left the job, it started showing itself in those traits remained with me. The hypervigilance, I missed the constant danger. Now, some of the danger remained because of some things that I won't get into here. I may talk about that on Patreon because I think there's some great lessons there. Forgive the noise in the back. It's just some moron with his leaf blower out there. I got a guy that lives across the street from me that likes to mow his lawn every day, every morning. I saw him out mowing his lawn in the rain the other day, wearing a raincoat. The type. Retired with nothing else to do. So just try to ignore him like I do. So when I no longer had that job, I was still living according to that mindset in a very different world. Okay? And the feeling of hypervigilance and isolation and such just increases, and you try to make yourself a part of the normal world, and it becomes very, very difficult. And I know a lot of the guys, and a lot of guys here on YouTube will have a lot of military, particularly, who make YouTubes on, combat-related situations, shooting or survival and things like that. And in that sense, they've kind of kept themselves in that venue, and they keep their friends, and they relate to, and they stay in contact with other people who have been, I'm going to pause this for a minute until that idiot stops. I'll be right back with you. Okay, I think he's done. Well, so anyway, well, I forget exactly where I left off, but when you leave the situation that calls for all of those abnormal behaviors, and you find yourself in a normal world, that's when, at least for me, the difficulties set in. So I found I did have a lot of, and I didn't identify it as PTSD at all. It still wasn't talked about. It wasn't, it wasn't a thing in the 80s and even the 90s. I don't remember when I started hearing about it, but I just pushed it off. That's crap. That's nah. Just get tough, and this is the way it is, and you're a man, and men for thousands of years have done, dealt with horrible things, and that's what it is to be a man, and deal with it, toughen up and all that. I when I started dating Kelly, she of course came from a much different background than I did, and I remember one time we were taking a walk around a pond and a little lake in the city, taking a walk around, and all of a sudden a splash occurred from the shoreline, and I went into immediate, I jumped, I flinched, I stopped myself before I went on, and she started laughing, and of course I got mad, irritated, irritated, I guess, and and I don't think I tried to explain it. I just, and she laughed, and that made me irritated. Well, she also used to like to jump out at me from the dark, and that didn't go well. And she couldn't understand it because she was just joking around, and of course she couldn't understand the life that I had, and I couldn't understand why she couldn't understand it, or at least just accept what I said. I went years. I was fairly successful in business, but I was not a sociable person. I was not a social person. I didn't want to get close to people. I was very suspicious of everything. The classics, very, some would call it paranoid. We call it careful, right? Finally, sometime later, some years later, I happened to look at an article about PTSD, because I more and more people were coming along with this PTSD situation. And I said, what is this stuff? I don't believe in this stuff. Well, it said it was an article, and I don't remember where it was from, but a well-respected journal or something that I put some stock in. And it explained all about it. And then it had a checklist of like 30 things, and check this if you experience this, or if you think this, whatever. And I went down through it, and it says, if you have 6 or more of these, you would consider to be experiencing PTSD. Well, shit, I had all but 2 of them. All but 2 of them. And I think I kind of mentally fought against that for a little bit, but I couldn't dispute it. And there was no doubt that my behavior and my feelings were abnormal, at least for this world. And normal for one world, abnormal for another. Got to the point that through some things that I won't get into, I came to, let me just put it this way, because this goes back to something that happened years before that I'm not going to get into here. But God changed me. He changed me. You've heard the term born again. Well, I've been a believer since I was 12. So I won't lay claim to a born again experience, but God will change you at any point. He no matter what point you have taken yourself to, He has a perfect plan from that point on if you will follow his directions. And I got to the point to where I finally sought that. My life changed completely. I won't say that I don't still have some of those hyper-vigilant or very careful traits in my life. But the idea that people can't be trusted evolved into the understanding that some people can't be trusted and some can. That life can be dangerous, but it's not always dangerous. That your life can be under threat, but it's not always under threat. And that there is a beautiful and wonderful life around us in this wonderful world full of many wonderful people that God has provided us to give us a fulfilling life outside of that need for stress and violence. He broke me of the addiction to stress, the addiction to danger, the addiction to violence. Those are very real addictions for those who have never experienced that. I want to throw in something real closely here, real quickly. For those of you who experience PTSD or are dealing with it, don't be upset and don't be irritated that others who can't understand it. For those of you who can't understand it, who haven't been there, count yourself fortunate that you have not experienced the things that cause it. And be gentle and understanding with those who are experiencing it. For those of you who experience it, I don't know and I can't say whether there would be a psychological intervention to be able to deal with it. What I will tell you is this, is that God, Jesus Christ, is the one who will solve it. He will make you whole. He will cure you. And he will give you a life and a peace, as the Bible says, that is beyond understanding to you at this point. A life of fulfillment, a life of enjoyment of the basics, a life of friendships, a life of mutual trust between people who are worthy of trust. I don't trust anybody until they prove that I can, okay? I will be accepting, I will be courteous, I will be sociable, I will be friendly. But no, my trust comes at a very high price, and so, that's not an issue. But you know what I've found? There are a lot of people out there that can be trusted. There are a lot of good people out there who are loving. There are a lot of good people waiting to be friends, willing to be friends, and able to become good friends and a support system, as the hermit said in his tribe. These people, for the most part, they won't also. I know good people that I think are great people that don't necessarily share my faith tradition. Still good people. Still people of high honorable expectation. But your personal experience is between you and God. The damage that has been done in your life through choices either made by others and you became the victim of it, or in cases like mine where I made those choices. I chose to go into those situations that then had that effect on me. Whatever it is, it's an unhealthy situation. It is psychologically, mentally, emotionally damaging. You are disabled. You are disabled until that is cured. It can be cured. I want to tell you that now. You will hear, just like AA tells drunks, you will always be a drunk, you will always be an alcoholic. That's bunk. That is pure DBS. And the same here. I'm here to tell you, okay, there will be those that say you're going to live with PTSD for the rest of your life, and it's just a matter of managing it. Bunk. It may be if you try to handle it on your own. But you ask God to be the fixer. You give yourself over to Him, and you allow Him to make you a new man or a new woman. And He will. And you will have a life you can't believe. You will have a joy-filled life that you would have never imagined. Shortly after we got married, I was talking to, well, as a matter of fact, the wife of a very good friend of mine, a guy who I considered my spirit brother, who had a life very much like mine, who didn't separate himself out of it for most of his life until the very last. To give you an idea, he spent 3 days nailed to a tree in Laos when his team was taken out and he was captured. So he and I understood many things alike. And I called one time and he wasn't home. And his wife was there, and I got to talking to his wife, who was a very religious person. Now, she had not known me during my other days. And we got to talking, and she said, you know, I just can't imagine you, the things that Jim has told me about you. I can't imagine you as that. And I told her, I said, I was one of the worst people you could imagine. She said, I can't believe that. But I believe Jim because, you know, he wouldn't lie to me, and he tells me about you. And the thing there is, God had changed me so much that here was a person who could not even believe that I had ever been another way. Even though I still enjoy ticking off the people who are offended by the way I drink my coffee. Anyway, I don't know who that will mean anything to, but there's somebody that will mean something to, and I wanted to put that out there. I have been able to help some people. There are others I have not been able to help. But it wasn't me the helping. It was me giving the direction. The direction is this. Go to God. Go to Jesus Christ. Give yourself to Him. Ask Him. Let Him know. He says, I understand this kind of life that I'm living now is not worth living. It's not the life you meant me to live. Help me. Change me. Make me a new man or woman. And He will. And you will have a life ahead of you that is so full of joy and so full of peace that you right now cannot even imagine it. So, I'll leave you with that. Best wishes, thoughts and prayers for those of you who are experiencing this. And let the one who made you fix you. And you all have a good day. Bye-bye.